Be me, Damon, 29, solo app developer. No team, no office, no investors. Just me, a laptop, and a kitchen table that I haven't cleared in about a year. I build things alone because that's how I've always done it. Started coding when I was a kid because it was the one place nobody could tell me I was doing it wrong. Fast forward to now, and I'm married. Wife's name is Margot. Met her at a friend's thing. She was funny, sharp, had opinions about everything, and wasn't afraid to say them. Back then I liked that about her. I figured a woman who pushes back is a woman who's actually paying attention. Turns out there's a difference between pushing back and just pushing. Took me a few years to learn that one. Early on it was fine, better than fine. She'd argue with a movie, argue with the news, argue with her own friends, and I found it kind of electric. I'd grown up quiet in a house where nobody said what they meant, so a woman who said everything she meant felt like fresh air. What I didn't clock was the direction the arguing always pointed. It always landed in the same place. Men were the problem, men were the obstacle, men were the thing standing between her and a better world. At first it was about other men, distant ones, ones I could nod along about. Then slowly, over years, the spotlight drifted closer, until one day I realized the man she'd been describing as the problem was sitting across the table from her, holding a fork. Anyway, this is the story of how my wife took the one thing I built with my own two hands and tried to put her name on it, and how it went for her. Grab a coffee, this is a long one. Let me set the table first. I freelance to pay rent, boring contract work, fixing other people's broken apps, building little tools for small companies. It pays okay, but it's not the thing. The thing is the app I'd been building on the side. I'll keep it simple. It was a tool for the little guys. Contractors, one-man operations, people who do real work and then have to chase their own money for months. The kind of guys who fix your roof or wire your house and then send 3 invoices and still don't get paid until winter. My app handled all of it. Tracked the jobs, did the math, sent the invoices, chased the payment, told you exactly when money was coming in. Nothing flashy. It just worked, and it worked for people. The big companies never bother to build for. I'd talked to dozens of these guys before I wrote a single line, sat in trucks, stood in half-built kitchens, listened to electricians complain about getting stiffed by people twice their size. That's where the whole idea came from. Not from a whiteboard, from listening to men who were tired. I'd been on it for about 8 months at this point. Nights, weekends, every spare hour. I'd finish a contract at 6 and code until 2. Not because anyone told me to, because when you make something and it's actually good, you can feel it, and you can't put it down. Let me tell you what those 8 months actually looked like, because it matters for the rest of this. My freelance work paid the bills, but it ate the daylight. So the app got the leftovers, the hours after everyone normal had gone to bed. I'd test it on real contractors, guys I'd met, send them an early version, and ask them to break it. They broke it constantly, which is exactly what you want. One plumber called me at 11 at night to tell me a button was in the wrong spot, and he was right. I fixed it that same night. Another guy, a Tyler, told me he'd been stiffed on $3,000 by a homeowner, and my app was the only reason he had the dates and the proof to get it back. That one phone call kept me going for 2 months. I wasn't building a thing to get rich. I was building a thing because I'd watched too many honest working men get walked on by people who knew they didn't have the time or the paperwork to fight back. That was the whole soul of it. Give the small guy a paper trail and a clock he can point to. Nobody at the top builds that, because there's no glory in helping people who don't have much. I figured there was money in it eventually, but I'll be honest, the money was second. I just hated watching good men get cheated. Margot knew about it, obviously. We lived in the same apartment. I wasn't hiding it. I'd tell her about it sometimes at dinner. Show her a screen, walk her through a feature I was proud of. And every single time she'd give me this look. Not interested, not even annoyed. Just kind of bored, like I was a kid showing her a drawing. One evening I told her I'd cracked a problem I'd been stuck on for a week. Real breakthrough, the kind that makes the whole thing click. She didn't look up from her phone. Men and their little rescue projects, she said, and went back to scrolling. I let it go. I let a lot of things go back then. That was kind of my whole problem. She had a thing about men. I'm not going to dress it up. Somewhere along the way, she'd decided that men were basically a defect to be managed. Everything came back to it. A guy cut her off in traffic. That was male aggression. A waiter got our order wrong. Male incompetence. I left a cabinet door open. That was me taking up space without thinking about it. Her favorite word was toxic. I heard it so many times it stopped meaning anything. She used it on coworkers, on strangers, on guys in shows we watched, on me. There was no behavior a man could do that couldn't be filed under it somewhere. Work too much, you're proving something. Work too little, you're useless. Stay quiet, you're emotionally stunted. Speak up, you're aggressive. I used to try to win those conversations. Then I learned there was no winning, only how fast you wanted to lose. She had a circle of friends who all talked the same way. They'd come over and the whole night would turn into a contest of who'd been wronged hardest by the nearest available man. I usually just made the food and disappeared into my office, which they also had opinions about. One of them once asked Margot, right in front of me, why she let me have a room to myself. Like the office was a privilege she'd handed down, like the rent I paid half of came with conditions on which doors I got to close. Margot just laughed and said she was working on me. Working on me, I was a project to her too, I just didn't know it yet. There was another night, a couple months before all this kicked off, that I think about a lot now. Her friends were over again, and the topic was a guy one of them was dating. He'd lost his job and was struggling to find another one, and the whole table tore into him, called him a deadweight, said she should leave him, said a man who can't provide isn't really a man. Same women who, 10 minutes earlier, had been talking about how men need to be more emotionally open and stop tying their worth to their jobs. I pointed that out gently, just asked how both things could be true at once, and Margot looked at me like I'd cursed in church. That's such a male thing to do, turning our pain into a debate. That was the answer. I'd noticed a contradiction, and the contradiction was somehow my fault for noticing. I went back to the office. I was doing that a lot by then, retreating to the one room where the rules made sense. One of those nights really sticks with me. Maybe 4 or 5 of her friends over, wine open, the usual. I came out to grab something from the kitchen. One of them asks me how the little computer thing is going. Before I can answer, Margot jumps in. Oh, he calls it a startup? I call it his way of getting out of doing the dishes. Whole table laughs. I stood there with a glass in my hand and just kind of smiled. Didn't say anything. Went back into the office and kept coding. Here's the thing. I wasn't even mad in that moment. I was used to it, and being used to it should have told me everything I needed to know. A man who stopped expecting respect from his own wife has already lost something. He just hasn't admitted it. I wasn't ready to admit it. Now, here's where I made my mistake, and it was a real one. I own it. Despite all of that, I still trusted her. She was my wife. You're supposed to trust your wife. That's the whole deal. So, when the app was nearly done, I did the thing you do. I showed her the whole pitch. The deck, the numbers, the plan, even the list of investors I was going to approach. I'd done my homework on that list for months, found out who actually funds small practical tools and who just chases whatever's loud that week. At the top of that list was a name everybody in that world knows. I'll call her Eleanor. She runs a fund. She's famous for spotting the boring, useful stuff before anyone else does. Built the whole thing from nothing. No family money, no shortcuts. Started with a tiny check and a lot of nerve. Getting in front of her was the entire plan. She was the door. I showed Margot all of it, every page, every name, and I asked her, honestly, what do you think? She looked at the deck for about 10 seconds. Honestly, it's kinda weak, but it's sweet that you're trying. That was the review. I closed the laptop and figured she just didn't get it. That's what I told myself. She didn't get it. Except she got it perfectly. She understood exactly what she was looking at. I just couldn't imagine yet what she was going to do with it. About a week goes by, and something feels off. I can't explain it any better than that. You live with someone long enough, you can feel when the air changes. She was nicer. That was the weird part. She started asking me questions about the app. Real ones, technical ones, the kind she'd never cared about before. How does the invoice math work? Where do you keep the files? What's the password to this? What's the login to that? She'd bring me coffee while I worked, sit on the arm of the chair, ask me to explain things slowly. I answered everything, because why wouldn't I? I figured she was finally taking an interest, finally seeing the thing I'd been pouring myself into. I actually remember feeling grateful, thinking maybe we'd turned a corner. That's the part that stings looking back. I was happiest right before it happened. Then one morning, I opened my laptop, and I noticed my project folder had been opened. Timestamp from the middle of the night. I'm a light sleeper, but I sleep hard once I'm out. so I didn't hear anything. Files had been copied. I could see it in the access log, the whole deck, the mock-ups, the documents, copied to an external drive at around 2 in the morning. I sat there staring at it for a while, coffee going cold next to me, fitting. And I want to be clear about what I did next. I didn't wake her up. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even bring it up. Some part of me already knew, and the other part wanted to be wrong, badly. So I did the only smart thing I've ever done in that marriage. I shut up and started watching. And I started backing everything up, every version of every file with the dates, somewhere she couldn't touch. 8 months of work, every save, every draft of that deck with my name on the front of it. I keep a detailed history of everything I build. That's just habit from years of contract work where people try to claim they paid you when they didn't. That habit saved my life here. Every change I'd ever made was logged, dated, stamped, going back to the very first day. I locked all of it away clean, in 3 places, just to be sure. I didn't know yet exactly what I was building a case for. I just knew I was building one. The next stretch was the strangest part. I had to keep being normal, kept answering her technical questions, except now I started noticing the pattern in them. She wasn't curious about the app. She was filling gaps, the exact gaps you'd need filled if you were going to explain something you didn't build. So I started giving her answers that were true but shallow. Nothing wrong, just nothing deep. Nothing that would actually let her run the thing in a real room. I'd tell her the what, but never the why. Part of me wanted to see how far she'd take it. Part of me, I think, was already setting the trap without admitting it to myself. She never noticed. Why would she? She'd already decided I was the help. Took about 2 weeks to see the full shape of it. She got sloppy because she thought I was asleep at the wheel, like always. Left her own laptop open one evening while she took a call in the other room. I'm not proud of looking, but it was my work on that screen, my app. Except it wasn't called my name for it anymore. New name, new logo, new colors, and a whole story bolted onto the front of it. This was now the project of a woman who'd survived a hostile, male-dominated tech world and built a tool to take power back. That was the pitch. My invoice app for roofers and electricians had been turned into some kind of statement about toxic men in tech. And the funny part, if you can call it that, I was the only man who'd touched it, and I built the whole thing for working men, and now it was being sold as a weapon against men. My name was nowhere on it. Not the founder, not the developer, not the janitor. Gone, like I'd never existed. But that wasn't even the worst part. Scrolling down, I find emails. She'd brought in a guy, I'll call him Brennan, co-founder. From what I could tell, he was some guy she knew who was good at talking in rooms and knew a few people worth knowing. Didn't write a line of code, couldn't if you held his hand and spelled it out. But on paper now, the company had 2 founders, her and Brennan, and the way it was written up, any actual building that happened was just technical support. That was me. 8 months of my life reduced to 2 words by a man who showed up 2 weeks ago in a nice jacket. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't misreading. I wasn't. There was even a line in one email where she described the technical side as basically handled and not worth worrying about. Handled. Like the engine of a car is a small detail you sort out after you've sold it. And then I find the email that actually knocked the wind out of me. She'd gotten a meeting, a real one, a pitch slot, with Eleanor, the name at the top of my list, my contact, my door, the one I'd spent months figuring out how to even reach. She'd taken that too, not just the idea, the door. She was going to walk through the exact door I found, with my exact work, and leave me standing on the other side of it. And the meeting was only a few days out. Nobody had told me, obviously. I wasn't supposed to know I existed either. I read that email, and I just went very still. You ever get so angry you actually get calm? That's a real thing, I found out. Everything goes quiet and clear, and you can see for miles. I closed the laptop and went and sat in my office. Didn't sleep that night. But I want to tell you what I was feeling, because it wasn't what you'd think. I wasn't sad. I was done. There's a specific kind of calm that comes over you when a person finally shows you exactly who they are, and you stop hoping there's someone else. That's where I was, cold and clear. I thought about every dinner where she rolled her eyes, every friend's night where I was the punchline, every time the word toxic got thrown at me for nothing. And I realized she'd never seen me as a partner at all. I was a resource she was managing until she didn't need me, and now she didn't need me. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to scream at her. Screaming is what she wanted. Screaming is what she could use. Screaming is a story she could tell her friends about her unstable, toxic husband. I wasn't going to hand her that. I was going to let her walk all the way out onto that stage, and then I was going to be there. So how do you get into a pitch you weren't invited to? Turns out I had one card left. Years back, when I was just starting out, an older guy took an interest in me, kind of an unofficial mentor. A guy who'd been in that world for decades and didn't owe me anything but helped anyway because he liked how I worked. I'll leave him out of this by name. He's a private guy, and he'd hate being in a story like this. We'd fallen out of touch. Life happens. You mean to call people, and then a year goes by? I called him. Told him the whole thing, plain, no drama, just the facts in order. He was quiet for a second, and then he laughed. Not a happy laugh. The kind you do when something is so wrong it's almost funny. Turns out he knew about the pitch event. Turns out he knew Eleanor a little, had crossed paths with her over the years. He didn't promise me anything. Wouldn't, that's not his style. But he said, come, sit in the room, bring your proof, and let it play out. If the work is yours, the work will speak, he told me. Just make sure you're in the room when it does. So that was the plan. Be in the room. Simple as that. I spent the next couple of days getting my proof in order, clean and simple. I didn't want a pile of confusing files. I wanted a story anyone could follow in 30 seconds. Here's the date I started. Here's the date she opened the folder. Here's the 8 months in between with my name on every page. I practiced laying it out until I could do it without thinking. My mentor called once to check on me, asked if I was sure I wanted to do it in public instead of just suing her and being done with it. I told him a lawsuit gets you money, but it doesn't get you the truth out loud in front of people. And what I needed wasn't the money. I needed the room to see it. He went quiet, then he said he understood, and that he'd be there next to me. That meant more than I let on at the time. The few days before the pitch were the strangest of my life. I had to live in that apartment with her and act like I knew nothing. Eat dinner across from her, say goodnight, watch her practice in the bathroom mirror with the door cracked, my words coming out of her mouth. She even rehearsed the part about toxic men in tech with real feeling, like she believed it. Maybe she did. I think that's the part people don't get about someone like her. She wasn't lying to me exactly. She'd told herself a story where taking from me wasn't stealing, because I was a man, and men had taken enough already. In her head, she was balancing a scale. In reality, she was just robbing the one person who had ever actually been on her side. I said nothing. I smiled. I waited. The day of the pitch, I put on the one good jacket I own. Margot had no idea I knew anything. She spent the morning getting ready, all bright and buzzing, humming to herself. At one point, she actually told me she had a big work thing and not to wait up. Told me she might be late celebrating after. I told her good luck, and I meant it in a way she wouldn't understand until later that day. The event was at one of those shared spaces, glass everywhere, too much light, the kind of room where everyone's dressed like they already won. My mentor met me out front and walked me in like I belonged there, which is a skill I do not have on my own. Nobody stopped us. That's the trick with rooms like that. Walk like you're supposed to be there, and you are. We sat near the back, and I watched my wife and a man I'd never met in person set up to sell my life's work to the one person I'd been trying to reach for half a year. Margot looked incredible. I'll give her that. Confident, polished. She'd clearly rehearsed every second. Brennan stood next to her, nodding at everything like a bobblehead, hands in his pockets, very relaxed for a man who'd contributed nothing. And then they started. I have to admit the front of the pitch was smooth. She'd memorized my deck almost word for word. The story part she delivered beautifully. The brave woman, the hostile industry, the tool built to fight back. All of it. The room was nodding. A couple people were clearly moved. I saw someone actually put a hand over their heart. And for about 10 minutes I sat there thinking she might actually pull it off. That maybe charm really does beat work. That maybe I'd come all this way just to watch myself lose in person, live in a nice jacket. My mentor must have felt me tense up because he just put a hand on my arm and shook his head slightly. Wait, the gesture said. So I waited. And then Eleanor started asking questions. And everything changed. Here's the thing about people who actually build companies. They don't care about your story. They've heard 1,000 stories. They care whether the thing works and whether you understand why it works. Eleanor let the whole pitch finish, smiled politely, thanked them. And then she leaned forward. and she asked a real question. Something about how the invoice timing actually calculated against the messy, irregular way contractors really get paid. Simple if you built it, impossible if you didn't. Margot froze, just for a second. Then she gave an answer that wasn't an answer, a bunch of confident words arranged in the shape of one. Eleanor nodded slowly and asked another. About why a contractor would keep using it after the first month, what kept them from going back to a notebook. Margot reached for Brennan. Brennan reached for the slides. And the slides didn't have it, because I never put the deep stuff in a deck that lived in my head where nobody could copy it at 2 a.m. Then came a third question, sharper than the first two. Something about the one thing that actually made the app different from the dozen others that had tried this and failed, and that's the question that finished them. Because the answer was a specific decision I'd made after sitting in a contractor's truck, listening to him explain how he actually got paid in the real world. It wasn't in any document. It wasn't anywhere but in my memory and the code itself. Margot didn't even attempt it. She just looked at Brennan, and Brennan looked at his shoes. The two of them stood there, and the room got quiet. Not awkward quiet, the other kind. The kind where everyone realizes at the same moment that something is wrong and nobody wants to be the one to say it. Eleanor sat back, and she said something I'll remember for the rest of my life. "Who actually built this?" she asked, calm as anything. "Because whoever wrote this code is not standing in front of me right now." Nobody said anything. Margot opened her mouth and nothing came out. And Brennan. Brennan did the most predictable thing a man like that does. He stepped half a foot away from her. Physically, you could see it, the little shuffle sideways. "Look, I just came on recently," he said. "This is really her project. I'm just helping out." Threw her straight under the bus to save his own skin. Didn't even hesitate. 2 weeks of partnership. Gone the second the room turned cold. And I thought, there it is. That's the kind of man she traded me for. A guy who will stand next to you for the photo and vanish the moment there's a bill to pay. That's when I stood up. I didn't make a speech. I'm not a speech guy. Never have been. I walked to the front and I asked if I could show one thing. My mentor gave the smallest nod to Eleanor and she said, "Go ahead. Curious now." I opened my laptop and I put 8 months on that screen. Every version of that app, dated, time-stamped, going back long before Margot ever opened that folder. The original deck with my name on the front. The mock-ups with my fingerprints all over them. My notes in the margins. My bad early color choices that I'd fixed later. The whole history of the thing in order, undeniable, mine. I didn't even have to explain most of it. The dates did the talking. Everything she'd shown them, I'd built months before she touched a single file. You could watch the room do the math, one timeline next to the other. And there was only one way it added up. I said one sentence. "I'm the technical support." And I let it sit there. You could hear the air conditioning. That's how quiet it got. Somebody near the front actually winced. The woman who'd put her hand over her heart during the story part now had it over her mouth. A couple of people looked at Margot the way you look at someone you just caught in a lie at a dinner party, that specific mix of pity and disgust. I didn't gloat. I want that on the record. I didn't smile, didn't raise my voice, didn't say one cruel thing. I just stood there and let the dates speak, exactly like my mentor said they would. Cruelty would have handed her a way out, made me the villain of her next story. So I gave her nothing to work with but the truth. Margot watched her own pitch fall apart in real time. Color just drained out of her. And I'll give her credit for trying one more thing, because she went for the last card she had. She turned to Eleanor, and her voice did this shift, got softer, wounded, the practiced one, and she said it. This was just a man who couldn't stand to see a woman succeed. I was threatened by her, a classic case of a toxic guy trying to tear down a female founder and steal credit for her work. She actually used the word toxic. In that room, with those people, she reached for the exact word that had worked on me for years. She really thought it would land. She thought it would do what it always did, freeze everyone, end the conversation, make her the victim. And Eleanor looked at her for a long moment, longer than was comfortable, and then she said, "The thing that ended it. I'm doing this from memory, but it's close. Don't talk to me about a woman's work being stolen. I built my fund from nothing, with no help from anyone, and I know exactly what that costs. which is how I can tell the difference between a woman who built something and a woman who took it. And you, I'm sorry to say, are the second one. Cold, final, not loud at all. And that was the part that destroyed her. Because the one card she'd been playing her whole life, the card that worked on me for years, the card that shut down every room she ever walked into, got picked up and snapped in half by a woman, by the most successful person in that room, who'd earned every inch of what she had and didn't appreciate watching someone fake the climb and use her own struggle as a costume. The room shifted. You could feel it physically move toward me, all at once. Eleanor turned to me, asked me 2 more questions, hard ones, the kind designed to catch a faker, and I answered them in my sleep because it was my app, and I knew every brick in it, every choice, every reason. She nodded slow, the way people do when they've already decided and they're just confirming it. And she said, to the whole room, not just to me, we fund the person who built it, not the person who put their name on it. And that was it. That was the whole thing. Over. I'm not going to pretend I felt nothing watching Margot in that moment. I'd loved her once, the real version of her, or the version I thought was real, but mostly what I felt was just quiet. Like a sound that had been playing in the background for years finally got switched off. She didn't look at me. Couldn't, I think. She gathered her stuff with shaking hands, and she left. Brennan was already gone, of course. A guy like that is always already gone. My mentor walked me out after, and on the steps outside, he didn't say congratulations. He just clapped me on the shoulder once and said, "Now you know what your work is worth. Don't ever forget it." I stood out there for a minute in the cold and let the whole thing settle. 8 months. And it had come down to about 4 minutes in a glass room. I drove home the long way. Part of me expected to feel triumphant, and I didn't. Not really. Mostly I felt like a weight I'd been carrying so long, I'd stopped noticing it had finally been set down. I got back to the apartment before she did, sat at my kitchen table, and waited for the door. So, let me tell you how it shook out, since that's the part everyone actually wants. She came home about 2 hours later. I expected screaming. I expected the whole act, the tears, the speech, the part where this would somehow circle back to being my fault. But she just stood in the doorway with her coat still on, and she asked me how long I'd known. I told her the truth, the whole timeline. She nodded slow, and then she said the thing that told me there was nothing left to save. She said I'd embarrassed her in front of important people. Not sorry she stole it, not sorry she cut me out, brought in a stranger, took my own contact, and tried to lock me outside. Embarrassed. That was her wound, the one she actually felt. I'd watched my work get taken and rebranded into an insult aimed at men like me, and her takeaway was that I'd made her look bad by proving it was mine. I didn't argue. There was nothing in there to argue with. I told her I thought we both already knew this was over, and I went to sleep in the office. Margot moved out about 3 weeks later. Didn't fight me on much, which surprised me at first, until I realized there was nothing to fight over. The app was provably mine. Every date in the world said so. No lawyer alive was going to touch that. The marriage was a separate thing, and honestly, we both knew it had been over long before that stage. The stage just made it official. Brennan. Last I heard, he ghosted her about a day after the pitch. Turns out connections only want to connect to a winner. The second she lost that room, she lost him too, which, if you've got any sense of humor about these things, is its own little justice. She went looking for a man with status to replace the one who actually built things. And the man with status couldn't get out the door fast enough the moment it stopped being easy. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Then I remembered breakfast the morning after she copied my files, how she smiled at me and asked if I slept well. The app. Eleanor's fund made me an offer that same week. Not a story offer, a real one. Terms, and a number, and a handshake. I read it about 6 times because I couldn't believe a thing I made at a cluttered kitchen table was sitting in front of a fund like that, with my name on the top of the page. We shipped about 6 months later. My name on it. Mine. Alone. And the people who use it are exactly who I built it for. The small guys, the one-man operations, the roofers and the electricians and the plumbers. The ones nobody builds software for because there's no glamour in it. I get emails from contractors who tell me it's the first time in their careers they've actually been paid on time. Every time, no chasing. That's the part that gets me, honestly. More than the money, more than the win. I built a thing for people who get overlooked and ground down and treated like they don't matter, which, funny enough, I'd come to understand a little something about. Eleanor stayed involved more than she had to. She checks in, points me at the right people, tells me when I'm about to make a dumb call. I asked her once why she went so hard for me in that room when she barely knew me. She said something I think about a lot. She said she'd spent 30 years watching people with charm take credit from people with calluses. And that every so often she got the chance to make it go the other way, and she never passed it up. That's it. No speech about men or women, no lecture. She just hated theft and respected work. Turns out that's all I'd ever wanted from anybody, and it took a stranger to give it to me. Here's the last piece, and then I'll let you go. About a week ago, I got an email from Margot. Subject line was, "Can we talk? I made a mistake." I opened it. I'll be honest, I'm not made of stone. It was long. She'd had time to think. She'd grown. She saw things differently now. She said she'd been carrying so much anger at men for so long that she'd stopped being able to see the good ones standing right in front of her. That she'd let a way of thinking about men turn into a way of treating me. Her words, more or less. She wanted to meet. Just to talk. And I want to tell you what I did because I think it matters. I read the whole thing, start to finish. Then I sat there for a minute and thought about the woman who laughed at me in front of her friends. The woman who called 8 months of my life 2 words in an email. The woman who copied my work in the dark and then poured my coffee in the morning. The woman who stood on a stage and reached for the word toxic one last time to take the last thing I had left. And I thought about Eleanor saying, "We fund the person who built it." And I closed the email, and I left it on read. Didn't reply, didn't need to. There's nothing to say to someone who only wants to talk, now that talking might get her something back. She didn't make a mistake. A mistake is when you do the wrong thing once and feel sick about it the same second. She planned it. She ran it for weeks. She rehearsed it in our bathroom mirror. The only thing she got wrong was thinking I'd never find out, and thinking the word she always reached for would save her in a room full of people who'd actually done the work she only pretended to do. So, that's the story. I went back to my kitchen table the next morning. Coffee was cold, like it always is, because I always forget about it while I'm working. Laptop was open, and for the first time in, I don't even know how long, the work in front of me was just mine. Nobody to ask permission from, nobody to roll their eyes at it, nobody waiting in the dark to put their name on the front of it. Just me and a thing I made that actually helps people. And if I'm being straight with you, that's the most peace I've felt in years. I'm not bitter about it, which surprises people when I tell the story. I don't hate Margot. Hating her would mean she still gets to live in my head, rent-free, and she's taken enough of my space already. I just stopped handing her things. That's the whole lesson, if there even is one. For years I kept offering my respect to someone who'd already decided I didn't deserve any. Kept showing her the work, hoping this time she'd finally see it. And the day I stopped hoping and started keeping records was the day I got my life back. Funny how that works. The moment I quit trying to be valued by the one person determined not to value me, a room full of strangers valued me in about 4 minutes flat. Maybe that's the thing nobody tells you. The right people recognize good work instantly. If someone's making you prove your worth over and over and it's never enough, that's not a high bar. That's a closed door wearing a person's face. Anyway, that's it. Build your thing. Back it up. Twice in places nobody else can reach. And be careful who you hand the keys to. Even the people who promise to stand on your side, especially them.